K1 through K10. And then we had recommended that the applicant submit items or provide during testimony, items A4, A9, A16, variance 1, variance 3, variance 6. B6A through J, B10, C1, E1 partial, B2, E1 partial, E2, E4, F1, F8 partial, and I1. And I understand that everything's been provided to Bonnie, or they're going to be providing it during testimony.
That's good.
Well, so there would be a motion to deem the applicant complete based on recommendations in this letter. Motion.
I'll second.
Who make the motion?
Kim would be.
Kim?
I second.
I'm sorry.
Pat seconded.
Oh, Pat, okay. Okay, Mr. Passiano?
Yes.
Mr. Improvidugo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lemecton?
Yes.
Mr. Leal?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Dr. Russell?
Yes.
The notices for the hearing are in order.
And the binder, future page number. Okay.
No.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Kennedy. I'm an attorney with an office in Middletown, and I'm very happy and honored to be here tonight. I think I have not appeared in Holmdel in quite some time, so good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of my client, J.R. Cruz Corporation. J.R. Cruz Corporation is a very established construction company involved in the heavy construction industry, and by that we're talking about building roads and tunneling and building bridges, roads, tunnels in the greater New York City tri-state area. J.R. Cruz Corporation is in need of an administrative office building to house its administrative personnel, and that is why we come before you tonight. Agents of J.R. Cruz Corporation and or related entities have purchased the property located at 33 West Main Street, and we're looking respectfully looking for permission to convert that building into an office building. And as I'm sure all of you know, this was the building that was formerly occupied by Bank of America. And my client's representatives would like to renovate and expand the building. And essentially, the renovation plans include closing off the existing drive-through, construction of a 1,030 square foot two-story addition, construction of a 288 square foot addition, and some parking and curb improvements. We need, as the review letters indicate, site plan approval and bulk variance approval, and that is the application why we come to you tonight. If I could indulge the board, I'd like to depart from my normal typical procedure for a moment, and for reasons which will become obvious in a moment, I would like to spend a couple minutes just to explain to the board what tonight's application is not about. And by that, with your indulgence, Cannon Hill LLC, the same principles as J.R. Cruz Corporation, and Cannon Hill LLC is the owner of this office building, 33 West Main Street. And Cannon Hill recently also purchased, a couple months ago, the adjacent firehouse building. And thus, Cannon Hill LLC is the owner of both of those lots. Now, initially, for full disclosure purposes, we submitted to the township a plan for providing for improvements on both of those properties, a lot line adjustment for the properties, and other site circulation and improvements. And it was our initial intent, I guess for bold print, initial intent, that we were going to have both applications, submitted, giant applications submitted simultaneously, have it simultaneously reviewed, have it simultaneously approved, have it simultaneously constructed, and towards that end, we submitted a joint application. We met with your TRC officials, and we submitted plans in furtherance thereof. However, as is sometimes the case, we ran into an obstacle, or obstacles, mostly dealing with the fact that, as it stands now during the technical review process, we realized that any application for that firehouse lot, because of its very small size, is likely going to require a floor area ratio variance. And those of you know that's a use or a D variance, which is within the exclusive jurisdiction of the zoning board. So that was the obstacle we had to overcome, and we had a decision to make, either to process one application for both lots before the zoning board, or to process the office building application before you all, the planning board, and then process the fire lot application before the zoning board. And just so the record is clear, we debated and discussed and argued amongst ourselves, and all came to different conclusions, and then had another argument, came to different conclusions. And at the end of our internal debate process, it just seemed more appropriate, more feasible, more practical, and more expeditious to process two separate applications. So we're processing this application for the planning board for the office building, and presumably we're going to process a future application, hopefully very soon, before the zoning board for the firehouse building, for the firehouse lot. Just to be totally upfront, the decision really came down to a matter of timing. My client is in need of planning board approval to approve this office building, hopefully, as quickly as possible. And there are still some engineering and site plan details that we're working out with regard to the firehouse lot. And that's, my client's representatives have owned the office building, I think, for 2 years or so. So clearly they were, and they just acquired the ownership of the firehouse lot. So there were some timing issues, and my client is in need to expedite the office building process, as the client is looking to improve and occupy the office building as soon as possible. So against that backdrop, and after considerable internal debate, and I will add that the township was nothing but extremely accommodating during our debate process, we are just processing this application for this lot before the planning board tonight. Again, Madam Chair, I apologize. I would not normally take the time to explain what the application is not about, but given our prior submission, given the previously submitted plans, given our meetings with the TRC officials, Mr. Everett Cruz here, the principal of both entities, was adamant that I explain to the board the situation. Mr. Cruz rightfully did not want to be disingenuous, did not want to appear to be disingenuous, and did not want to appear to be sneaky, and didn't want anyone to not know what was on the table. So that's the information that we're disclosing. So again, tonight it's just about the office building, and what we hopefully you will confirm is a rather straightforward request to construct 2 additions on that site and to renovate and improve that building. As will be indicated, the additions we are proposing are relatively modest in nature, and we feel will make that existing vacant building more aesthetically pleasing, more functional, larger, and occupied. Right now, the subject office building is currently vacant and not really capable of continued occupancy. So for obvious reasons, we respectfully submit that office buildings on Main Street in the town should be and can be appropriately occupied. So that is what we're here for tonight. I have 2 witnesses, 3 if you need. One, Everett Cruz, who is the principal of the entity. He will tell you the operational details. And then Richard Ramirez, who is our engineer and planner. So sorry for that long introduction, but here we are, and thank you.
Thank you. Should we have the
Well, we'll swear both your witnesses in for now.
Sure.
Just asking to stand, and we're going to swear our board professionals at the same time. Swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Great. And then as they testify, Kevin, if you just ask them to state their full names.
Sure.
And their affiliations.
Okay, so we're going to proceed. All right, so we'll start with Everett Cruz. Mr. Cruz, just state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my legal name is Evaristo Cruz Jr. I go by Everett, make it easier to say. And what else?
Address for the record.
675 Line Road in Aberdeen, New Jersey.
And just for the record, for disclosure purposes, you are a licensed engineer, correct?
I'm a professional engineer.
Not testifying in an engineer
No.
per se, but just disclose that. The applicant is J.R. Cruz Corporation, Corporation of the State of New York, I believe?
Correct.
And you are the president of that corporation?
Correct.
And the owner of the property is Cannon Hill LLC?
Correct.
And you are the managing member of that LLC, correct?
Correct.
And as the owner, the LLC consented to the filing of this application?
Correct.
Okay. And just because I spent all that time just now, just for the record, you were here for my introductory statement, and Cannon Hill does also own the adjacent firehouse lot, correct?
Correct.
Now, firehouse lot was owned since roughly when? Just
I think it was September
of this year?
of this year, July,
And-
maybe July.
And the firehouse lot, as indicated, is not part of tonight's application? Okay. So for the record, J.R. Cruz Corporation, what type of business is that company involved in?
We do public work for municipalities and for cities. The city of New York, Army Corps of Engineers, Port Authority, Economic Development Corporation of New York City, the state of New Jersey, often times, but there hasn't been much work, but primarily the state of New York, the city of New York. And it's all public work. All for the betterment of the city.
And I had indicated on your website, I think, about creating tunnels, building bridges, building roads.
Yeah, we do varied things. We build tunnels, we build highways and bridges, sewers, water mains, all those types of facilities.
And I saw,
Infrastructure, if you will.
and I saw on your website, seems to suggest that these projects range from 1 million to 40 million.
Yeah, yes. Yes, we have, yeah, exactly.
So this is not the type of a single-family homeowner who's coming to you
No.
for help.
Our clients are the city of New York, like I said, Port Authority, Army Corps of Engineers, public.
Mr. Kennedy, you're trying to lay some groundwork so we know the magnitude of Mr. Cruz's business?
Oh, I just wanted
I
to-
don't understand what this has to do with.
Oh, nothing.
I don't know, yeah, okay, thank you. I just didn't know
No.
where you were going with this.
Yeah, thank you. And the point was that this is just going to be administrative office,
Yes.
correct?
That's,
And so, thank you. And where is your administrative office currently located?
It's in Aberdeen, we're renting space in Aberdeen.
And, I'm sorry, and it's just an administrative office right now in Aberdeen, correct?
I think what Kevin was getting at was that we're not going to house equipment or materials or anything. This is just simply executive offices for our construction company. And all of our equipment and materials, et cetera, are all on the job sites or in our maintenance facility in Piscataway. So this is going to be simply
Just
an
an office.
administrative office. Yeah.
Just an office building, no equipment stored or maintained here or anything like that. Just for operational details, if you get the approval tonight, are you going to keep the Aberdeen site?
No, it's too small, and it has some problems with the building. It's an old building, and I just wanted to build a nice office building for my employees. They're all executives, they're all professional engineers or administrative staff. To give you a little bit of history on the Cruz family, we've been in Holmdel since 1980. I'm jumping ahead of you a little bit.
That's okay.
We've been we've had a presence in Holmdel since 1980. The Cruz Construction Company was a well-established company back in the day. And it's gone by the wayside. My father died, and it's gone by the wayside. But in 1980, we established a building on Holmdel Road. It was the Cruz Construction executive offices. And then about 4 or 5 years later, another office building was built by my brother at 943 Holmdel Road. That was E.E. Cruz. And that was that green structure that used to be the old, you guys are not old enough to know maybe, but it used to be the old tennis court. And that was built as an office building for them. And so in that tradition, I'm the next generation. I want to build the same thing, like the same kind of a state-of-the-art and special place for my employees, and that's the reason for this.
And speaking of employees, roughly how many employees do you anticipate being
We have
on the
about
site?
25 to 30 administrative and engineer.
And what type of employees would they be?
They're engineers, they're all professional staff or administrative secretaries, that type of employees.
Do you anticipate receiving any type of regular deliveries other than paper and supplies?
No, we don't receive any materials per se to the site other than mail or boxes of gifts or whatever.
So like a FedEx or UPS?
FedEx, UPS type stuff, yeah. It's not, all the material goes to either the job sites or our facility in Piscataway. We have a large facility in Piscataway for where we operate our construction operations.
So just deliveries at a standard office with receipts.
Correct.
And for the record, anticipated hours of operation for this office,
7 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock, more or less.
Monday through Fridays?
Monday through Friday, not too often on Saturdays and Sundays.
And are there employee shifts or strictly 7 to 5?
No shifts, just 7 to 5.
Okay. And I have the building right now, some of the tenants were Bank of America.
Yeah, it was Bank of America, there was some, couple of real estate firms,
Century 21.
mortgage company at some point. But when we bought the building, there was only one tenant. It was, the Bank of America had gone, and there was just one tenant. It was a Century 21. They occupied a quarter of the building. And that was about it.
And right now, the Century 21 left, so the building's...
Century 21 left. We are in the process of renovating the inside so that we can put offices inside.
So the building's vacant.
The building's vacant.
And why don't you just talk a little bit about the building and why you feel it needs to be upgraded and renovated a little bit?
The building was in beautiful shape. Structurally, the bones were very well maintained, but it needed an upgrade, it needed a facelift. It needed energy efficient windows, for example, and better insulation. There was some areas where we found a little bit of mold, so we had to do some repairs there, demolition, selective demolition there. So in that process of upgrading it and giving it a facelift and making it energy efficient, that's what made us go into more extensive renovations than we had anticipated.
And I understand you're also going to fix what I'll call the rear of the building, which is not a typical. Why don't you explain?
Yeah, we're gonna use the rear of the building as the front of the building, so to speak. You drive through the driveway, and then you'll see the vestibule and the entrance to the building. Somewhat similar, if you're familiar with Aquaviva, Ron Aquaviva has a building, and you have to drive into his driveway to see the front of the building, similar to that. In the front, we're going to have landscape and such, so you don't see, other than maybe the upper portion of the building, you're not going to see much of the building. So it'll make it nice, make it really attractive and user-friendly.
Is the facade of the building sort of blend in with Main Street Holmdel?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes, absolutely. We went to great lengths to make it look, similar to what's out there now.
The only thing that's going to be different is, in that second picture, there's going to be signage up top. Is that correct? Same says Cruz?
Yeah, where we had an interface with the new brick and the old brick, there's like you never get rid of that little line that's created, so we're sort of putting a sign up there that says J.R. Cruz is going to be backlit, so at night it'll look nice at night. And
My question is that the front of the building?
That's
Or the side of the building, or the entrance of the building?
No, this is-
I can't see.
this is
It's
the,
the board that's fronted to the left,
This is
the
the
top
top
elevation.
left, right.
Yes, that's what you're gonna see from Main Street.
yeah, if you're on Norman Springs Road, you're going to see this.
Okay.
And you're referring to, Kevin, what is that we're referring to?
The one, A?
This is, do you want to mark that in A1?
Yeah.
A1.
That's what we're going to see from the
And again, I guess it's sort of an interesting concept, but fairly standard. To the board, this board, the front of the building is the fronting Main Street, but we have a functional front in the rear, correct?
Yeah,
Because
when you drive through the driveway, you're going to see this part. You're going to see this here.
and the employees will enter
The employees will enter through here.
Yeah, make that A2.
A2. Thank you.
That atrium was on the original plan, that was on the side of the building, that's the previous one, right? The picture was below it, is that correct? Yes, is that the previous, that's the building that you have now?
No.
That's what it's gonna
The
look
building
like.
didn't have this.
That's the side.
That's the side.
Side, yeah.
So the glass is facing the back of the parking lot. So
Like
that's-
that, like the top
The
picture.
top is facing the parking lot, and then the two sides are kind of when you're in the driveway.
Okay. Okay.
And it's really just showing that you can see the atrium, that's from the parking lot. But they're taking out, there was a drive-through over there, they're removing the drive-through.
And Everett, I had, second to last question, I had indicated there was some type of time sensitivity, so is it safe to say you're anxious to
Yeah,
start?
this project took a little bit of a detour when we bought the firehouse. What happened was the firehouse, if you look at this lot, it's an L-shaped lot. It's, the back part, the L part, is behind the firehouse. So when the firehouse came for sale, it's a very small lot. And I thought, well, this would be a great thing to acquire, that way I could put the back part of the L to it with it and make a nicer lot, you know? And I'm the only person, by virtue of my being owner of this lot, to be able to do that. So I'm gonna create two nice lots in Holmdel. That's what it's a no-brainer.
That's not part of this
We're not,
application.
yeah.
But that's not part of this.
And just in conclusion, do you have any concluding remarks before we turn it over to the board, or?
No.
In regard to, you're speaking of this urgency, you're looking to expedite this, is it, I imagine that's just because you're anxious to carry on business there? Or is
Carry
there
on
something
business.
else that we should be aware of?
No, I'm gonna carry on business. I have a facility I'm using right now on Line Road in Aberdeen that is, it's about 6,000 square feet, 90 more space. And, this will just be a great asset for me at this point.
The existing
Sooner the better.
facility is how many square feet?
It's about 12,000 square feet.
About 12,000 existing?
Yeah.
What's gonna be afterwards?
About 1350, something like that. Or 13,005, something like that.
It's about 1,000, roughly 1,000, 1,500.
Yeah.
That's on 2 floors.
Yeah, and I think a question was asked that I didn't answer correctly, or properly. This is where the drive-through was. Somebody asked that question. This is where that drive-through was.
Right.
Okay, if you can just let us know, you're referring to which.
A2.
Thank you.
Now, post-development, is this for the sole and primary use for Cruz entity only, or is it?
Yes.
You plan on subleasing?
No, our intention is to use
Use the
it
entire?
solely for ourselves.
Okay.
Jen, let's talk about buying and parking. Let's talk about
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's paramount here. Okay, it's,
How many spots are there now?
credit relief.
Yeah.
They need 70 parking spaces and they have 73.
Okay, so they're
So,
fine with parking.
yeah.
Okay. There's septic in the area, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about that in a minute. Are you going to?
I have our engineer
Oh,
to
okay.
address that. if
I'm sorry,
that's-
I'm
I'm sorry.
okay.
I'm sorry. I thought you
No,
meant-
it's okay, so I should, something, parking is, and we're looking at front side setbacks and that nature.
No, they don't have, they are not encroaching in any of the setbacks. The lot existing is at 60% coverage, so that's fine. We're gonna need some testimony on the height of the building.
Sure.
But the relief that they need is for a loading zone for, which they've already discussed, that they don't really have large-scale deliveries, and the width of the driveways and the signage.
There is a slight increase in the coverage, the pre-existing non-conforming coverage, and they're adding 25.2 square feet of additional coverage. So it is a little bit of a variance.
Anyone have any questions?
I do. Mr. Cruz, how many of these employees live in Holmdel?
Live in Holmdel? I don't know. I know my son lives here. I don't think, I'm not sure if any live in Holmdel.
Okay.
The taxes are too high.
Hey, that's another subject. You haven't voted yet.
I'm only kidding.
The reason why I'm asking is this. We enjoy having you in town, of course, and you're very successful. And we think about high school kids all the time, summer programs and things like that. Have you developed, or would you be willing to develop any sort of program to invite our juniors and seniors
Absolutely.
to be part of the summer,
Absolutely. We have-
internship? Thank you for that.
We are big with that. We are big. I can give you a whole, history of that. We
I'm
have.
just going to, in terms of our discussions and for the application, I don't know if that's necessarily something we should probably be discussing. But thank you. Any other questions of the board?
Down to the brass tacks. Hopefully, you have some.
Your engineer.
Yeah, engineers I'm talking about, yeah.
Richard Ramirez, come on up, please. And just state your name and office address, please.
Vice Chairperson, members. I'm Richard Ramirez, a professional engineer, professional planner. I happen to be an attorney in the state of New Jersey. I'm licensed in 16 states, very involved with the Hurricane Sandy renovation process, completed about 2,000 restoration projects. We're very proud of that. I'm one of those engineers that loves what he does, and it's a privilege to do what we do. When Everett spoke a little bit about the internship stuff, we do that all the time too, and it's a very positive thing for us. So I'm very excited that Everett is short.
And just for the record, you've been qualified as professional witnesses before other boards before. Would you like any further discussion about qualifications?
Just by way of clarification, I made some small size copies of a plan at discussing the matter with Mr. Kennedy and Bonnie Curry. Great, thank you.
We'll mark this as A3.
Right. And this helps to further clarify the nature of this plan that we're doing. The main thrust for this plan, this particular stage, is for the building and to add on an addition where the drive-through was, like a two-story addition, and then put a nice vestibule in the back. In order to do that, when we close the drive-through, we end up, as Ms. Hurd pointed out, we end up with a road running into the building that's now occupied by enclosed office space. What this display shows, A3, is that the plan for the next phase was to have that driveway moved over closer to the property line. That does necessitate a variance, if not two. And that would now have to be a bondable part of this particular application. I didn't see that as an issue at first. Once Bonnie raised it, I agreed that that would then have to be a bondable part of this because the board always considers, well, what if you don't go through to the next phase? You have to have standalone phases. This plan is in front of you, makes it standalone, so that if nothing else were to happen, the site functions.
So you're gonna build everything that's on this plan?
No.
Then what are you building as part of this plan? You gotta clarify it for the.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. Thank you so
Sorry, I
much.
didn't mean to.
No, thank you, because that was my question.
So we're building the office, we're enclosing the drive-through, making it 2 stories rather than just 1-story drive-through. We're building the vestibule on the back of the building, and we're building enough of this driveway that's on the west side of the building so that.
Time out.
Yes.
I'm really confused, I'm sorry.
Can you maybe highlight on the plan
I'm just trying to
exactly
follow
what
this.
you're building as part of this?
Is it
Because
phase 1 or phase 2? Which you talking about phase 1?
We're talking about phase 1.
Right, okay.
Phase 2, the intent for phase 2 had only been to do a subdivision of the property to give more of the lot, to basically balance both lots out. Both lots would be slightly.
Yeah, but right now, we're just concerned with one lot. And that's why it's confusing. We have 2 here, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is for the sole purpose of just letting you understand that a portion of what was going to be phase 2.
Right, let's
But
just
we're not
focus
at
on what
phase
you're gonna
one.
build in phase 1, because the board just needs to understand what the actual application is about.
So we're, just for clarification, okay, what we're talking about tonight,
The big plan also, is that the same as the little plan we have?
Yes, it is.
So we should mark that.
A3?
Yeah. Or really.
I appreciate you guys being so very thorough, but you're so thorough, it's a little confusing.
No, I understand.
Mr. Ramirez, if you can, for the board, stand by the big A3, point out to the board what those changes are.
So the existing driveway had been interfered with by enclosing the drive-through. So now that the drive-through is going to be a functioning two-story office, the driveway has to pass by closer to this lot. So it's going to be shifted over. There'll be an 18-foot wide driveway passing by the side of this office. And to accomplish that, we have to shift it over.
Do you have, is there, just so I can understand what you're talking, do you have photographs that you can direct our attention to, anything that I can see, because I'm losing it a little bit
Yeah,
in
'cause it's hard to
translation.
tell which is the back part of the building, which is the front part from that,
Yes.
from that drawing.
Okay, so just so that I can clarify for the board, the bottom of the board, which is what now, A4?
A4.
Is the road. A3. That's our, that's it.
Wait.
The road is at the bottom of the drawing.
The elevation of the
Yeah, okay.
So-
This is the road right here, so the building is on that elevation. Okay.
So then you go in the main entrance, on between the two buildings,
Okay,
and then circle around to come into the rear vestibule, and when you're leaving, you come out the driveway.
Okay, so the relief that you saw there, Jen, is,
The width of the driveway.
okay,
The driveway, there's.
which is, width of the driveway is what, 18 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, and
There's also a requirement for a 20-foot setback from property line and a different requirement for a parking lot being not 15 feet from the property line. And
what is the setback now with the 18 feet?
right now, a couple feet, hold on, about 4 feet.
That's all pre-existing.
No, it's not.
What's there now?
Has to be used over.
What's there now? You want to move the road over, I understand that, but what is there now that you want to move over? What's it going to be encroaching on?
Grab that big
Just vegetation?
Again, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
The property line is how many, the driveways, how many feet from the property line?
It's like a couple feet.
Yep.
4.7?
2.7.
2.7.
No, that's,
old.
that's,
That's old.
yeah, the existing one.
so it's on property line, and what does it need to be?
That's what
20, yeah,
that's what I-
21.
So you're approaching here, so.
Right now, it looks like it's about 8, 9 feet
9 feet,
at a minimum.
that's about right. And the setback is, I stated the setback's 20?
One section requires a 15-foot setback, the other requires a 20-foot setback.
Okay.
So it is pre-existing, non-conforming, but we do have to aggravate the situation a bit more to accommodate in closing the drive-through.
Thank you.
For us, I mean, it seems to be more of a technical aggravation because there shouldn't be much impact to the neighbors given the level of traffic that would be emanating from the site. With 20, 25 cars coming in the morning and about the same leaving in the evening, there's not much opportunity for stacking to occur or other traffic conflicts. So we would suggest that this, while being an encroachment and requiring a variance, is more of a minor nature and accommodation because the building exists where it is.
Bonnie, the neighbors were properly noticed?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so there's no, yeah, so there's no neighbors, okay.
Rich, there was a question about the height and whether the height conforms with the township's ordinance. Can you give some information on that?
Sure. The height is to the,
And just reflect on what you're referring to,
in A2, the height is referenced in your ordinance as to the mean height of the roof. And in this instance, that's 28.5 feet where 30 feet is allowed. So we're in no need of a variance for the height.
I just did want to show them, so I just wanted to make sure testimony was put on
But
there.
actually, that's important.
and just, was it 28.5 or 28.9?
I'm sorry, 28 feet 9 inches. 28 feet 9 inches is the mean height.
One of those correct pictures.
Okay, so enclosing the drive-through, building the vestibule, and what else are you seeking?
We need to build part of the driveway. I'd like the board to, if it's possible, to give Bonnie the authority to work with us to figure out exactly what part of that driveway needs to be built. The reason for that is because we hadn't intended on building any of it at all.
I think you have to build the whole thing.
Excuse me, ma'am.
I think you would have to build the whole driveway.
The whole driveway to the back parking lot.
Yeah, and make it,
And that's fine, but we won't be building the new parking lot at this secret.
But I'm very confused about if you're building a driveway, where is that driveway going to?
Well, there is an existing parking lot back there. It's just going to be slightly reconfigured.
Okay, presently, existing parking lot satisfies how many cars?
73.
Presently.
Correct.
And we only need 70.
Okay.
In fact, under the new configuration, which we're not going to talk about, we're decreasing the impervious somewhat. I apologize for the confusion.
So you're asking for the building of the atrium, the closing out of the drive-through, and what else?
And building the driveway to the rear parking lot.
Okay, and renovations and addition, and an addition as well, because you're adding square footage to the building, is that correct?
Right.
So there's 4 things.
But that
The
square footage,
The enclosure of the drive-through
Is the additional square footage?
Yes.
Okay,
And the
okay, great, that's good. I think that might have clarified that a little
and
bit.
all the rest are internal improvements.
Okay.
Now, the driveway, it will circle around the property. Will it be one way in, one way out?
The
2 ways, right?
It's got to be an egress and ingress on each.
The main driveway coming in is ingress, egress. The driveway coming out is only egress.
That's current, right? That's what's currently there.
Current, yes.
So that's not going to change?
Just being
It's
reconfigured.
gonna be
Configure.
How wide is the driveway currently? Egress?
nineteen feet.
All right, so it's taking a foot off.
It's going to be less, I thought it was going to aggravate it more.
The width of the driveway he's talking about.
Okay.
What's the
So
driveway?
it's going to be closer to the property line than it is now, but it's going to be a foot narrower than it is now.
Okay, is there anything else that we need to be concerned with, that we need to have some questions answered?
Can we get some testimony on how you're proposing to address the ADA parking requirement and providing an accessible entrance into this building? Because that would have to be done in this phase.
Rich can address that.
Sure, on exhibit A3, where the proposed addition is close to the driveway, where the drive-through was enclosed, there's going to be a handicap accessible door into that part of the building. And then there's going to be handicap spaces provided immediately adjacent to that doorway.
Can you point to that?
somewhere? Is
Right
that
on
on there?
on the,
Because I can't see what he was pointing to on his paper.
If you look at your
Look at
plan,
the building,
where the
right.
proposed drive-through is being enclosed,
Right there.
right here is the
Yeah.
parking spaces
Okay.
with the wheelchair symbol in them.
Okay.
So the parking, referring to A3, sorry about my back here. So these handicap spaces that are over on the side will be constructed as part of the first phase?
Yes.
Yes.
And Rich, in your opinion, will what you're proposing satisfy the applicable ADA requirements? And you have received a copy of the T&M Associates letter?
Yes.
And then the engineering comments?
Yes.
Anything in there that you can't live with, or you could comply with all those?
We can comply with the requirements, and many of them were suggested we could seek waivers on, and I would request that those waivers be considered at this time.
And but we can comply with the technical requirements?
Yes.
One last question. Earlier in the evening, I think it was Mr. Cruz who testified that the only deliveries that we're getting from FedEx and UPS and things of that nature. And I think, Jen, you had talked about a loading zone.
We have a requirement that they have to have one loading zone, one loading space.
In our ordinance.
It's in our ordinance. So they need relief for not providing one, and the testimony provided by Mr. Cruz indicated that they're not anticipated to get any large deliveries.
Yeah, I was-
Typical
yeah,
office.
that's-
And
So I would take no exception to the relief.
typically, the
And that-
FedEx truck
That's what I
parks
was-
the parking space.
And we don't need to worry about, like, if they're moving furniture to the building, things like that, you don't, that's not,
Well,
they're just behind the loading zone?
typically that would be done before you bring your employees, because you have to outfit the building. So it'll be done, and then once the building's up and running, like any other office building in town, then, once the building's up and operating, then that's really not a concern. And considering the applicant is also the owner of the building, should that come up, I'm sure that he would be able to ensure that any kind of delivery of that magnitude be done on a weekend or outside of any kind of operating hours.
And we could
So it's not to
absolutely
cause a conflict.
Do you see a problem?
Now, our ordinance is a little bit different than the residential types person standards. In residential developments, they do permit one-way 18-foot driveways. A lot of towns permit one-way 18-foot driveways.
Okay, I'll make sure.
And there's no parking off of it, so you're not gonna have people backing out where you might be tight.
Yeah.
And what about safety vehicles?
Safety vehicles,
In other-
typically a lane on the highway is only 10 or 12 feet wide. So they drive down the highway, and you should be able to get through.
Okay, but we don't have to worry in regard to a fire truck being able to
Well,
maneuver
we
there.
would normally, if the board were inclined to approve it, they're always conditioned upon complying with the fire official's requirements.
Okay. And I had some questions in regard to, looking at this, and it looks like a lot of trees are going to have to be removed. Is that correct? If you can explain a little bit more for me, what's going to have to be removed, and if there's going to be anything planted elsewhere?
Sure, again, this again is basically a hybrid phase. The ultimate goal is to have a very nice landscape foundation with a number of trees. There will be a formal landscape plan presented to you at the next time.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
We're not going to defer landscaping to phase 2, which is an application going to the zoning board. This is phase 1, you're here for site plan approval for phase 1. We're going to need a landscaping plan associated with this phase, and it needs to be implemented with this phase. Because the subsequent phase that's going to the zoning board is a completely and separate application for
Agreed.
this application. So that's something that the board is going to want to see implemented now.
That's a fair request, and we would have absolutely no problem with that.
But I think the trees that the vice chair is referring to is located along your western property line, and when the driveway moves over, you will have to remove vegetation in order to install that driveway, correct?
Right.
So would the applicant stipulate that they would provide a landscaping plan, should the board act favorably on the application, for the review and approval of myself and Bonnie, to ensure that adequate landscaping is being reintroduced to the site so that we're not just clear cutting and not reintroducing any
No,
landscaping.
that is the intent, to do just as you said.
And I've communicated with Mr. Cruz, we have absolutely no problem complying with that condition. Fair and reasonable condition.
Audience, anything to add?
They just need a couple of other additional items of relief. One is, we require a tree for every 8 spaces in the parking lot. They're not proposing that, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not opposed to that either because it becomes a maintenance nightmare when you're trying to plow and things like that. But I would just ask that when you're providing that landscaping plan, that you take into consideration that 9 trees would have been required in this parking lot, and to find some place on the site to put those trees, even if they're outside the parking lot.
Got it, we know that.
And then I would take no exception to that relief. Of course, all of that's up to you guys, but I think that, you could make the building look really pretty from the road, and the parking lot's in the back, so it's not really gonna be visible. And then there's just some relief for signage. Are you gonna talk about the signage?
Right, presently, there's a monument sign that exists in front. It's also shown on Exhibit A3. A large part of that area in front is occupied by the existing septic system and will further be occupied by an expansion so that there'll be a renewal of the septic system. And that sign will have to be moved to accommodate that. We would like some relief to show the sign in the approximate location that it appears. The ordinance requires us to ask for some relief. I believe the requirement's 25 feet.
Sir, would you mind showing us on the exhibit where?
Where the sign is going to be.